So, brief introduction. So, Alex Cowan has been working with us for quite a while now. We were fortunate enough to have him do a lightning talk last month. And he's also done an MVP workshop with our friends down in San Jose at the San Jose group, which is a really great way for everybody to get detailed feedback on their product as opposed to more general theoretical knowledge. So I'm really happy to have him here. He's one of the few people, I know a lot of people who decide to start consulting companies and then say, we're going to do our consulting company, but then we're going to actually build products. But a lot of them get so caught up in the consulting that they never manage to make the jump to products. So Alex is one of the people who's actually succeeded doing that and is doing some absurd amount of transactions with telecom companies.
Absolutely, sir.
5 of the big telecom companies in the world. Yeah, we'll just leave it as unbelievably huge, right?
Yep. I like that. Thank you.
Unbelievably huge is a good number. So please give a warm welcome to Alex Cowan.
Thanks for having me. How many of you are doing consulting now? Okay, wow. Most of you. Good, we've got the right audience here. So, my name's Alex Cowan. I am the author of a book called Starting a Tech Business, and I'm the founder and CTO of Untitled Systems. Untitled is an enterprise software company. Our customers are communications service providers, hosted communications service providers. So these are phone companies, cable companies, across the world. We work with about 60 of these folks now, and they did an absurd $350 billion in revenue last year. Their victory, not ours, but we were very happy to be their partner. Untitled started in 2007. I was out on my own, I needed a job, so I started Untitled, and Untitled started doing consulting. I personally, I love consulting, don't you? How many of you like doing consulting? Okay. About 2/3 of you. Good. Well, I liked it a lot. I love it because it pays the bills. Untitled has never ever received any outside funding, so this was a necessity for us. And consulting is relatively easy to scale. You find the right kind of deals, the right kind of talent. You repeat. It scales in a relatively linear way, which is a great way to get business to critical mass. And as if that wasn't enough, it turns out that consultants have a lot of the right skill sets to do customer development. They're trained to go in and do customer engagement and talk to people. They're trained to go in and learn, discover things. They're trained to think about creative solutions to those things and then go pitch those and sell them and validate them, which are very important to customer development and some of the rare skill sets that at least in the startups that I work with, we never quite find as much as we would like. So I wanted to scale the business beyond just trading time for money, as Spike Morelli once put it, who's a Lean startup member here. And so we moved to what I would call productized consulting. And what I mean by that is we had a set of repeatable, standardized products that we generally sold on a fixed price basis. And this is even better than consulting because, number one, it's much easier to sell. You're selling a known proposition to a known type of customer. It is easier to scale up and it's easier to staff. Staffing and execution, of course, is your major cost driver and cost component around any consulting business. The reason it's easier to do that is that element of repeatability, and then also if you're repeating something, you should have some intellectual property multipliers behind these engagements that you're doing. And then finally, it's easier to manage the whole thing because, again, of that element of repeatability. And that's particularly important if you're going to use the productized consulting as a springboard to something else, which is what we did at Untitled. We took the things that we learned with our customers and the additional financial headroom that the productized consulting gave us, and we started to do product development. Now, this may sound like a lot of work in discovery and whatnot. I would say, how many of you are familiar with the 4 steps to the epiphany? How many of you read the whole book? Wow, a lot. Very studious crowd. The most of the discovery and validation work we did with our customers was in these early phases when we were in the consulting business. And this may sound like a lot of work because we even had to do sort of mini discovery and validation loops for each of our additional products. Always iterating through basically a build, measure, learn loop. But I think that It wasn't, because A, it allowed us to do what we wanted to do without going out and getting outside funding, which we didn't want to do, and B, a lot of software is built without enough customer discovery, particularly in the B2B enterprise software space. And guess what? An appalling number of enterprise software implementations fail, 50 to 70%. It's amazing. It's a staggering number. And our numbers at Lean are way, way better than that. And I attribute that mostly to the amount of discovery that we went out and did. Good question.
Are you saying 50 to 70% of people build a product and no one buys it, or that they build a product?
They build a product, or somebody implements a product in an enterprise, and when Gartner goes and calls them and says, did the engagement meet your expectations? Did you accomplish what you wanted to accomplish? They say, no, it didn't. That's what it is. It's a good question. Sorry. I don't get to get down to all these details. It's the way I would like it. Yes?
But I can just throw in, I used to manage customer support centers. Every single customer support center system that I ever saw was 86 within 2 or 3 years to do something else because people were so frustrated with it. So that's what you're talking about here.
Yes. So the first thing that we went after at Lean was actually work around the integration of VoIP subsystems. So we're a little outside of this IT domain. The reason we did that was we knew about this topic. It was what I'd been doing in my last job. And around 2007 was when Lean had started. There was a lot of transition from these legacy telephony systems to voice over IP, which meant a lot of flux and turmoil and change for a lot of operators as they implemented these new internet IETF-based technologies. And the rub was the systems that these things were replacing have been in place for decades, so even a very well-trained, qualified, smart engineer would have to manage like 3,000 to 5,000 pages of documentation to be able to go do this. So that was very, very onerous and difficult. So we would go through, punch through these systems, make sure they were working properly, teach everybody about best practices, and then we'd deliver a document that was like 200 pages that would allow them to understand the system fundamentals and basically something you could hand to a new engineer on this network and say, look, this is what we have, this is how it works. If you want to change anything, understand these fundamentals and document it in this way. So that was great. It saved our customers a lot of wasted time and money, and we drove to a consulting product that we called Network Principles of Operation. It's performed really well for us. This particular opportunity did not present anything product-wise that we thought was really interesting or a good fit for Lean. But what I do think is notable about this is that there's a lot of segments today that are in the same situation where there's a lot of disruption, a lot of change, a lot of flux. Best practices are emerging. There's a lot of topics around mobile, reactive design, early configuration management using tools like Puppet and Chef to do application management in data centers is such an area. So I think, if you look out for opportunities like this and you have the right skill set, I think you'll find quite a lot of them, and that's a great beachhead for any new business that you want to grow and scale up and use as a base to do something. So
that's specifically because there's confusion. It's a good.
Yeah, I mean, if customers know how to do something, they don't really need consultants. Maybe they need temporary staffing help, but they need somebody to come in who's like, hey, there's no obvious recipes for doing this stuff. We've done it a dozen times though. We can come in and help you learn the easy way, not the hard way. That's really the kind of thing that I'm looking for to replicate this pattern here. So we would always, as we were in these places, we made sure we did a good job. We always asked our customers, what else is on your A list? And we learned a lot that there were problems around order management and services provisioning. It was taking too long, there were lots of errors, just a kind of a big drag. And really that was because in the services that a lot of our customers have been selling, they were relatively simple. Bit rate, a number of phone lines, kind of oversimplifying here. But when they started selling hosted applications like enterprise telephony, cloud enterprise telephony, there's literally probably 2 orders of magnitude increase in the number of hooks and dials and parameters that everybody had to wrestle in and manage and get under control. So the first problem scenario we went after was with the network operations folks that we had been working with. And they said, hey, why don't you come in and, if you want, write some text processing scripts to take this order data, validate it, and just provision a bunch of stuff on these various VoIP subsystems. Because right now it takes somebody like 3 hours to do this, and it's just begging to be automated. So why don't you do that? So we did it. It's easy. It took the initial version took a week or two to MVP and go and get to the customer and have them try out, and that was great. But our audience was very limited. What these operators really wanted was a tool that their services provisioning folks could use, because the engineers were needed on other things and they were expensive and so forth. So this kind of needed a GUI, more of an application experience. So we MVP'd that, we iterated through it a few times, and this was really much more difficult. Building application software, understanding that audience, that was what was really hard, but it was very worthwhile, because this is when this thing started to become a really substantial product. Then the next problem scenario we ran into was the operator said, the last thing I need, the IT department needs, is another stray IT system. So we need to understand, how does this fit in with our big picture? So we concepted an API that would make sense for their upstream systems to use, and we MVP'd that, put it out there, and after a couple iterations, that started working well. And one of the notable things I wanted to call out here was that we really took a lot of time to understand all the different parts of these organizations they were working with, even if they weren't all buyers, because they all mattered a lot, and they all were very influential in allowing us to get to the quality footprint and the amount of interaction and involvement that we have with this software today. And
So those are the products that you're selling, those two MVPs?
This became a product that we now call low-key provisioning, all this stuff here. So that was actually all just about one product. And so this is something we have in the market today, and then we started hearing a lot of questions about service quality. So they have the network up and running, they can provision these things. How do they make the service really competitive and compelling and interesting to users? This was the next thing that we really started to hear a lot of. So this is where the practice of design thinking really came into play, and was our sort of main thing that we're executing against this type of engagement. How many of you are familiar with this rubric of design thinking? Okay, quite a lot of you. So, probably more of you are familiar with the 4-step stuff. I would say, in those terms, customer validation and customer discovery are really sort of a subset of this body of work around design thinking, which is basically about creating an empathy for the customer and then applying creative solutions against that empathy. So, the design thinker at some point went in and understood that the seamstress needs a better cutting tool, and they engineered the sewing center. It's kind of a simple, cutesy example, but it's actually a pretty good one. It's very, good fit. So the interesting thing about design thinking is that it's trending. Everybody likes it. It's very popular. So if it's so obvious and so terrific and so self-evident, why are all these books and blogs and talks and workshops and things? And I think that one of the main reasons is we're kind of wired from way back when to try to compel other people to our ideas and our actions. And it's just sort of the way people are wired. Design thinking is a little bit of a new thing in human nature, or you have to sort of swim upstream a little bit in that regard. Even around the turn of the last century, Henry Ford says, if I asked customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And how many of you were here for the .com period? Oh, not very many of you. Well, back then, product design was kind of pretty much the same. It was a lot of like, we're going to build this thing, people don't get it. They didn't get it, nobody bought it. It was a lot of this sort of crash and burn without, because people didn't go out, they didn't develop this empathy, they didn't really think about the user very much. They just wanted to go have people love their solution. So now you have this practice of design thinking, a lot more talk about UX, and this stuff is practiced by companies that the public admires and wants to emulate. So all this is very good, and the even better news is that there are very ready tools that anybody can pick up and start using to do this stuff. You're probably familiar with some of them. The first one is personas. These are just very vivid depictions of your buyer and your user. So you make sure you can describe these people, and then you make sure you can describe problem scenarios they have. So when people go camping today, they don't know how to go to the bathroom. Is that really true? You have to, go find that out. And for example, and then we follow through from those to user stories. So user stories are, part of the Agile development methodology, and this is a developer consumable statement about something you think that the user wants to do with your product to address one of their problem scenarios. So these are the tools we use at Leonid, at least, and it makes practicing design thinking something that you don't have to have cool glasses or a Vespa or a Mac or anything like that to do this stuff. It's very accessible, and you can do it. It's really quite easy. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. The hardest thing that I find with creating these personas is just having people get started. That's with startups that I mentor or the staff at Leonid. And the first thing you usually want to do with a persona is just be able to describe these people in a very vivid, non-arbitrary way. And one litmus test I always ask, and I'll kind of give it to you before the fact, usually ask people when they come talk to me afterwards, is what kind of shoes does your persona wear? Can you have that in mind? If you know right away, then good. You have a good, vivid depiction of this person. And then beyond that, a really good checklist, certainly not the only way to do this, but a good checklist is what does this persona think, see, feel, and do with regard to your particular area of interest. By the way, I love it when you guys take photos of these slides. It makes me feel terrific. But I'm going to put them all on SlideShare, and we'll post the footage. Yeah, but feel free. So this is a good kind of checklist for creating personas, and I'll show you guys some templates for this. The other thing I like to do, it's a little campy, but I always like to give the personas a first name, like Mary the mom, Andrew the accountant, and it can feel a little silly to do this, but it keeps the personas from becoming arbitrary and disembodied, which, I've done this. Everybody I've ever seen write a persona struggles with this a little bit. They start just saying, yeah, well, so obviously this person is this, and they do that. And they stop thinking about a real person. They just start thinking instead of kind of implicit assumptions that they have, which is not what you want to do with this. You want to have a real live person in mind, or that wants to stoke your desire to go out and meet that real life person and go learn about them. So, most of you should have index cards. If you'll take 3 minutes, write down 3 personas that pertain to what you're doing. We'll take 3 minutes. I will count down the minutes for you. If you can't find pens, there's some here. If you raise your hand, I'll bring one to you. Okay, time. Now, as a special treat, we have a real live member of the Lean Startup Circle who's going to tell you about how personas have helped him and his company focus what they're doing and accelerate their time to market. This is Jacob Esparza.
Hi. All right, so I'm Jacob Esparza, CEO and founder of Making Friends. We're a startup here in San Francisco, and we're developing an iPad app for teaching social skills to children with autism spectrum disorder. And so we use customer personas to identify our community and for better understanding product marketing and sales. And while using these personas, we've identified 5 main ones that really helped us. They're the child that's using the app, the parent of the child, the teacher, the researcher involved, and the behavioral therapist. And so while developing these personas, we identified 2 problem scenarios. One is content creation. So this is like the limiting factor for most educational apps companies out there. The second one is individualized learning. And this has to do with what we learned from the market is there's a wide range of individuals that are diagnosed with autism. And with that diagnosis comes a wide range of skill and behavioral deficits. And so it's up to us to figure out who we want to target for our product. And just having these personas and helping us guide through these conversations has really just been helpful for us to focus.
Thanks.
Yep.
So I'll be around too. Thank you. So I'll be available to talk to you more about what you wrote down if you have questions afterwards. So as we went out and did these service design engagements with our customers, we created a set of personas for them, looking at actual people that were using these types of systems. These are an example of a few of them. So again, these are about offices that use enterprise telephony. So these are our customers' customers. And at the same time, we had actual enterprise personas, so these are buyers and users of our product. And in case you doubt that these are real flesh and blood people, one of these personas, in fact, this man right here is among you tonight. He's a real flesh and blood Leonid customer. We're going to play a game where you try to find him after.
Is he still wearing the blue shirt?
No, that is not. I guess he is. I'm not sure it's the same shirt. So the nice thing about this persona problem scenario driven product design was that it actually started helping our customers inadvertently resolve a lot of problems with their whole service delivery chain. So it turned out that the lack of a really good, descriptive, empathic product design was kind of breaking things all the way down the delivery process for these products. And having these more design thinking driven, persona driven product designs actually started automatically kind of helping the business perform better, spend less money, make more money, and it created even a lot of further opportunities for improvement beyond that. So it worked out really well. We validated this. We drove to a consulting product that we call service design, which we do all the time, and it's really successful for us and our customers. Yes?
Did you find that understanding your customers' customers was also really important to you being able to sell to your customers?
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, because you're getting inside the problems that they're trying to solve, right?
Yeah. It was very important. It was very beneficial for us. We have absolutely piggybacked. So one thing we found, though, as we were doing this, and this is, I think, another example of the kind of discovery you'll get with this sort of deep engagement, was that web portals were a real problem. The out-of-the-box stuff that was available just wasn't really driving end-user self-care. So somebody who has this enterprise telephony system, the idea is that, you know, instead of diddling with this weird phone interface, they can go onto this great modern portal and manage their phone system in their office just like they buy airplane tickets or, you know, watch Netflix or whatever. You know, it seems reasonable enough. So it turned out that the products that were out there weren't really very good. So the first thing that we worked on was building a product that we called Loki Portals, and basically our initial problem scenario was just getting a portal out the door that dovetailed with the customer's product design, that was consistent with their brand identity and the rest of their visual program, and just, you know, generally operationally made sense for them. So we built Loki Portals with a template-driven front end and single sign-on technology for integrating with the rest of our IT systems called Scalable. And that worked out well, and we got something out the door, but, you know, guess what, that really didn't matter that much. The whole point was to drive customer involvement up and to drive calls to the call center and tickets and things down. So this was like the real test. And so we hung a couple of assumptions for this, that end users want to log in and do this. That was an assumption. We all kind of like assumed that that was true, but we really didn't know that. And then two, that getting kind of the current options they had about 4 to 6 clicks to get to what a user wanted, down to cutting that in half is sort of a very coarse UX goal. That was sufficient for the users to go in and do this stuff. So we Lean Startup style, we hung those two assumptions explicitly, instrumented in the necessary analytics to validate or invalidate those things, and we successfully invalidated them both. Totally pretty much wrong about all of that. And what it turned out was the case was that it wasn't really the end user, so the person using the phone, but it was the customer admin. So a business owner at a small business like a dry cleaning shop, or the office manager at a somewhat bigger business, or the IT person at a bigger place. These were the people that actually wanted to go in and do this stuff. And then the other thing was that 2 to 3 clicks still wasn't good enough. We kind of got, you know, hey, I don't get this, you know. So we knew that we needed to really focus on this customer admin experience and learn about it. So we MVP'd a new Tristan.
Did you find that out because of the metrics that you saw, or was it
Yes.
from customer interviews?
Both.
Okay.
Both. We did both. We instrumented logging and reporting into the application, so we had a quantitative view of what was going on, who was logging in, if anybody. But some people did log in to do this, and we found that it was predominantly that customer admin. And then, you know, they had some sort of subject customers that they would go and sort of re-interview after they'd had the system for a little while.
Oh, so you were able to tell exactly who was using it, and then could have talked specifically to that person?
Not necessarily. I mean, they didn't really have recourse to do that for all those people. They had people that they'd sort of pre-select, the sort of Nielsen family.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
Follow-up question on that, because in my experience, it's been very difficult to get to that end, the customer's customer. So I don't know if that's part of what you're going to speak on, but how did you get to that?
Oh, they brought us in there, and we were helping them with this service design consulting. So as part of the program was just to go. We went with them. We didn't just go barge in on their.
All right, so they gave you access, I mean, with them.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them are small businesses, so you know, not a big deal for them.
Okay.
Initially, I've seen companies prototype what the customer might be and get the basic like profile and personas and things like that kind of basically sorted out.
I think the main thing is you have to tell them what do you want to find out and what are you going to ask these people.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can do that, but a lot of times what I found is that, well, they want to present the best thing possible. So if you're going to do like early prototyping or something like that, and testing, that they don't want their customers to see that. necessarily?
Well, this was essentially a mass market offer, so it was, it was okay by them. It was just sort of a relatively small portion of their customer population. So we focused on the customer admin. We did another interface. This helped a little bit. It got the numbers up, but they really weren't where we wanted to be. So we hung another assumption. We realized, okay, the office manager, this customer admin, they still just don't feel like they have enough visibility. So we hung a new set of assumptions that, well, ultimately these people really do want to do this, and if we get it down to like one click, they have complete visibility to everything they want to see on a single page, well, that'll be good enough. And then we built a new interface called the dashboard, which they could see all their end users in a single page when they logged in. And so this finally started to really get the numbers where we wanted them to be, mutually us and our customers. And that actually started to kind of work. Do you have a question?
If you're taking questions,
No, go ahead.
Is this like a hosted solution? Are you rebuilding these for your different clients? Because you're a contractor at this point, right? And you're trying
We
to
are.
validate ideas as a consultant.
No, that's a good question, kind of indirectly. So we have a product we call Loki Portals. We use a technology called Smarties, an open source templating engine, to build an HTML, CSS front end layer. So everybody's running the same codes, products, everybody's the same thing. And then the customer or the customer's agency, web agency, or us ourselves can go in and change that stuff and change up the way the thing looks.
So your A/B testing that you want?
Some of them may be tests, some of them don't, but they can all have their own customizable UI.
So you got the basics, same underneath is all the same software, but then you've got sort of a white labeled front end that they can.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really white label. They can do whatever they want with it. I mean, there's some we haven't even seen.
You've taken a step from going from just being a pure consulting agency to offering software that's customized.
Yeah. So from a deployment standpoint, it's not a hosted solution for us. It's enterprise. I mean, we give them the software, they run it in their own data centers, and then they offer hosted service. Yes?
So how did you sell the idea that you're selling this consulting service, you're being paid to write software, but then you...
Well, just to be clear, we were selling licensing, and optionally we were selling consulting to do these customizations.
Okay, so you didn't sell, okay, you pay us to build this and then we're going to sell it to other people. You pre-sold the product before you made it, then you made it.
That's right. We pre-sold it as like, okay, we really want to have this. We're going to sell you a non-exclusive license to it, and we're going to go build it. And that's a good question, because we did get that in the early days. Well, if I'm paying for this, why don't I own it all? Well, really, it's a reasonable question on their behalf, But really, the issue is, hey, you have to sell them on the fact that you're going to be a product company, and what they're going to get way more than they paid for if you go and you productize this and you scale it and you sell it to other people. And that proposition has to make
So get benefit of upgrades and all those kind of things. Right?
Yeah, and more services and more features. That has to make sense for them. But that's how we did that.
Have you had education before you anything? I'm just curious. Like,
6.
This isn't for everyone.
Landon's company was one such place that we pitched many times and never took it.
So is this a provision tool or a support tool? Because they're typically different systems in themselves, are they not?
This is that's a good question. This is a tool that, the internal audiences that our customer will use. And then their end users will also, like if I manage the Foot Locker down the street and we have like 5 phones, I would log in and change up the phone system with this. So it's sort of multi-tenant and it's SaaS, so it's multiple login layers. Not to bore you guys with stuff about the product itself.
So it's not Verizon's MSO to do a provisioning, it's the enterprise that's got 5 phones there and 5 locations.
Well, Verizon would run this, and then their customer can log in.
Got it.
So this started to work. This got the numbers where we wanted them to be. And then the next problem scenario we really went after was people wanted to be able to change up the phones, especially power users like receptionists. So this is kind of how that looked from a design thinking standpoint. So this Rhonda, the receptionist, wants to be able to have a more elaborate out-of-the-box configuration, which means our operator needs to be able to tweak their out-of-the-box configs better. And then they want to be able to go in and easily change up the buttons. The problem was they had these LCD phones, it was very difficult to do this. And then our operators who were running this cloud service ended up with this very complex local configuration. So kind of the obvious thing to do was to build a cloud-based system that somebody could log in, see their phone, and manage it. So from a lean startup standpoint, there were a couple assumptions about this. One, that end users wanted to go in and do this, and fortunately, our partners had already built a prototype and had a huge amount of demand. So we got kind of lucky. We didn't really have to validate that fundamental demand vector. Then, can our customers, is this going to help them? Or is it going to generate more tickets than it, more troubles than it solves? Now we really just, had to go to beta with our customers to see. And then kind of one level up, was this required some new plumbing? Was this stuff going to be so fiddly that, our revenue model wouldn't work because we got, so many questions about this or that. So we had to validate all those things with lab testing and beta and things like that. So, and then, you can see that we get into some like second order priority assumptions that we made about this stuff that were just sort of product design decisions. So we always make the priority 1 assumptions things that are sort of existential, and then priority 2 stuff tuning around the edges, just sort of a important housekeeping detail. So we MVP'd something we call visual device management. It's like very literal. People can see their phone and play with it and change it up, and it works well. Thousands of people now use this to twiddle their office phones. Again, they work the way they want. So the thing we're going to do now is, I work with a lot of startups who are like, yeah, we're doing lean startup, but they haven't actually listed all their assumptions. So we're going to do a quick exercise, 3 minutes again. Write down 3 key assumptions about your business and a quick note on how you might test them. I will count down the minutes. The next thing that we did, we'll talk about these afterwards. I'll be available to answer questions if you had them about those assumptions that you wrote down. The next thing we looked at in the final case was about process design. So our operators they had these networks up and running, they were selling service, their customers were getting in and liking it. They were looking at how do I run the business better? And the first thing we did was process audit. So we created a process inventory, and we looked at how much time different tasks were taking, and how the time was being spent. Was it sort of wasted time, waiting time, or constructive time? That was great because it gave us a lot of qualitative and quantitative data about how this stuff was really working at the customer. And then we moved on to doing process design. So if we start a new business or we're going to redesign our processes, how do we do that? And then that was great because that gave us user stories as an input to build a business layer product. So we created an application that we now call Loki BPM, but we actually implemented a lot of this stuff on Sugar CRM and Salesforce, which are 2 popular CRM platforms. And so the first problem scenario was, so why do we do this? Well, what we ran into was the business owners couldn't actually implement all the recommendations we'd gotten to that they wanted to go do with the stuff that they had. So that's how we knew there was an opportunity to do this. And then we looked at, there were so many things, with the business layer. I'll just give you a few examples, but a lot of the time, the operators would have different systems depending on what product or what channel the customer was sold through, and so consolidating this stuff on a CRM platform is a really great way to get order management, customer management in order, and then going and getting new e-commerce solutions going for different channels or different types of customers, different regions. This was hard, so we focused on billing and how to help them do order capture in a relatively minimal fashion. So I have 6 tips for all of you that are consultants that are looking to do this stuff. The first one is just find stuff that you'll get paid for. The best way to get to product market fit is just find work that somebody will pay you for. Then look at things that you're consistently seeing or hearing customers want to do and drive to standard products and test those. Then focus on selling similar customers. So I'm not going to say pass on other business because I don't want any of us to end up out in the street, but I would kind of balance the easy business that comes in the door with stuff that you think is really tactical for doing this stuff. Because arriving at a productized consulting business you'll have a product that's easier to sell and you can use channels. You'll be able to upsell a lot easier when you're successful in engagement because all your customers know what's on the menu. Your cost of sales will go down. A consultative selling of this type is very expensive. But even if you're an individual, the opportunity cost of spending time on that is really expensive. And your delivery costs will go down because you're able to staff these things better, execute better, find the right talent. You should have some intellectual property multipliers behind the work. And then engagement management gets easier, which again is nice and particularly important if you're going to use this as a springboard to do other things like build software products. So I think that the other things are to create an extended family. So you're going to need other partners, probably, certainly we did, to do things that either you don't know how to do or just aren't in your focal area, particularly as you drive to productized consulting. So find people, and I recommend avoiding contracts for finder's fees and stuff like that, because you don't want to kill these things with complexity before you get them going. If they scale a lot and you're bringing them a lot of business or vice versa, then you can make a contract about that stuff. Become a domain expert. If you can't take a customer through a kind of a concierge, a manual version of what they want to do with your software, it's definitely time to keep learning about that customer through consulting or whatever other means you have. And then build once you see the opening. But if you're not sure you see the opening, I would wait and I would learn more. I wouldn't say that always, because Lean Startup's kind of about trying things. But in this situation, if you're doing all this stuff, the opportunities should present themselves, and they really should be kind of screaming, obvious opportunities to build product if they actually exist. So there's a lot of materials on the website I'm about to show you to actually go in, and templates to help you start doing this stuff and take the first step. Those are on /resources on my website. My contact information is here. If you have a question about your company or you need a speaker, I'm really good at kids' birthday parties. Drop me a line. And so, thanks. Do you want to do some more questions, or?
I'd love to do some. We already had a nice group of questions already. I have one question immediately, which is staffing. So when you were, tell us a little bit about who was in the company initially, and did you have any issues with people who were just like, no, I like consulting. Like consulting tends to have a very high turnover rate of people like getting paid a certain amount of money in one consulting company, hopping over to another consulting company for an extra 10%. Mm-hmm. How did you deal with finding people who really wanted to productize what they're doing?
That's a good question. Well, I think the number one answer is that the first set of people we hired were people that I'd worked with in another job, and I knew them well, and they were just, there's a level of engagement because we worked, I've been their boss at another job or something, so they were just sort of, we had such a long history of working together, it was a better deal for them to stay and see what happened with Lean and go somewhere else, I guess. And then we paid them a lot. We were making money, so unlike a lot of startups, we didn't have to ask these people to work for nothing. So we were able to pay a very competitive package to these people. They make more money than me in a lot of cases.
Other questions?
Landon.
Did you have any kind of conflicts between consulting skills and engineering skills?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The biggest, I would say, I don't run the company anymore. We have a CEO who's great, and a guy who runs engineering who's great. The person who runs accounts is really good. But I think the biggest challenge we still have is getting that information. We have a much bigger product development organization. We had contractors initially, and then it grew very, very big, obviously, as we expanded the product line. And I think one of the biggest management challenges we have now is getting those outtakes from the consultant into the developers and giving them a vivid picture of what's going on. And it really is those design thinking tools that help us do that. We have a set of personas that are up on Google Docs. We always require user stories, even if it's kind of a very nitty-gritty, kind of workflow, technical sort of thing that we're doing. We still require a user story. So do we have challenges? Absolutely. It's really hard to do well. It's just something you just have to pay constant attention to. Yes?
Do you find that?
Sorry.
Okay. Sorry. Do you find that when you're trying to go in and sell that the user stories and things are difficult to sell people on, or do you find that it's an advantage over competitors that might be just selling against a feature checklist?
It's an advantage because we have the proof points on the market. We're the most widely distributed IT solution in this space, and we're very thankful to our customers for that. So I think, in the early days, I will tell you, selling the service design engagement was very hard because, the design thinking just wasn't as ubiquitous as it is now, number one, and two, it just wasn't as ubiquitous in the industry. So why do you want to go talk? We did get questions. Why do you want to go talk to customers? But we explained to them. We showed them the stuff we'd already built. We did do some of our own independent end user customer interviews, and we showed them what we learned from those things. And so we showed them. You have to show them. You can't be like, you should do design thinking because IDEO says it's good and they write about it in Fast Company. That doesn't work. People won't believe. They don't believe me. We showed them what we showed them.
And you were in your 6 steps there area. How many people were you? Was that?
Sorry, 6 tips. Those were the 6 tips.
6 tips, right?
That was a heresy.
Well, they're sort of in order, right?
Yep,
Start
yes they
off
are.
Just were you sort of one guy all through?
Yeah.
How many people were you at the very beginning?
Just one. It was just me.
When did you become 2? Like at which step?
Yeah, 2007. Oh, when did we become 2 at this point? Here. So by 2008, we were 8 people, and we had 3. We were sort of here on 3 of these consulting projects. So about a year and a half in, we had 8 people, and we had 3 of these productized consulting things that we were out doing.
Just a side point about that. I will say that I found myself in a position trying to do those things inside an existing consulting company, and I think it is actually substantially easier to start this way than to remove rigor mortis and take an existing consulting company and introduce this concept.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't exactly start saying we're going to build consulting, we're going to build products. We definitely knew we wanted to build consulting products. We didn't necessarily know that we wanted to build products, software products at the beginning. But yeah, I'm sure it's hard to change anything in an existing organization, I think. Yes?
What have you learned from the competitors? And what are the names of some?
Amdocs is like a big, huge UK company. They're kind of the big, we don't, I'm on camera, I'm not saying anything bad about it. We have outcompeted them successfully. Yeah, you can ask some real operators who are here. So they're and then there's a company, for example, there's a company called Sigma Systems. I think they were public for a while in Canada. And I think that I ran professional services, the professional service business at a company that was selling to the same customer base. They're actually our exclusive reseller now of our products. So I could do a whole talk about how we use the channel, but not to digress, but how do we compete with those guys? Because we cared and we didn't try to cram too much software down their throat. I mean, I think a lot of, won't name any specific company, but the classical approach, I think it's true of a lot of enterprise packages, is like, okay, our design strategy is to be like a tumor. We're gonna force our way in there, be as big as we possibly can, force out all the other stuff, because you kind of, if they said they just wanted a steering wheel, not to mix metaphors, but if they said they just want a steering wheel, we're like, no, you gotta get the whole car, or forget it, And we didn't do that. We did this stuff in a very modular fashion, so those were good entry points for us on the product side. And our customers appreciated that because, this was the recession, right, still, and they didn't have a ton of money to spend, and they needed acute, measurable solutions to very specific problems, and we did that for them. And I knew if we did product that we wanted to do that from my last job, because I was kind of the interface to a lot of the companies, and I was like, my God, this stuff is so bad.
So when were you able to look at your competitors and say, you know what, I don't need to validate this assumption because my competitors have? And when were you able to look at your competitors and say like, uh-oh, we should validate that?
We learned, everything we learned from our competitors, we learned by counterexample. And that sounds kind of glib and arrogant, but in this particular space, I have to, at least everything that I learned, that was the case. I honestly really didn't see a single thing that I wanted to emulate. So I don't think that's usually the case, honestly. And we do look at stuff, but
it's kind of the definition of business opportunity, though, isn't it?
Yeah. But and then
don't screw it up.
What was the second part of the question, Tristan?
You just
what were the things that we wanted to validate? Everything. And even things that we didn't think we needed to validate, we were like, as a kind of an afterthought, maybe we should just double check. We learned something. And that's the lean startup stuff really at work.
Who has an assumption that they wrote down right now that they'd like to share? It's very dangerous. No, it's not. Gimme. Who wrote down a persona that they'd like to share? Jacob? Jacob, by the way, just so you all know, is also a volunteer at Lean Startup Circle. He always manages to walk in right when we're carrying something really heavy, and he's awesome.
All right, so Rachel, the mom, she's thinking there must be an app out there for teaching social skills to my child with autism. She sees a lot of, hold on, I'm trying to read my own writing. Sees a lot of apps out in the market, tries them, and gets discouraged by that way, by just not getting value on these apps. She feels frustrated by all the noise in the market of, hey, look at this app, and it doesn't do anything. What she's doing is reading blogs, Twitter, and talking to her network of other moms to find out the latest on autism.
And then from an assumption standpoint, can I talk about the ones?
Yeah.
So I think, Jacob's company has an app for autistic children that, really, the only thing they really need to prove is that kids will actually engage with this because, parents are so, kind of as Jacob alluded to in his persona, they're so eager for something and they're spending so much money on therapy that if they can just validate that an application gets engagement with these children, they can sell it all they want. And that's, that has really focused your activity, if I'm not mistaken.
That's the challenge.
Did you use those assumptions for marketing?
Yeah. I mean, we're definitely testing. Like with the teachers, it's implement in 2 minutes for them. So learning that they don't want to do behavioral therapy because it's too hard to get started. And so yeah.
Now, I would encourage everyone to talk to Jacob. I mean, I hope it's okay if I should. His company has all this stuff up on Google Docs. They really actually write these things down and focus on them. They're a small company without a lot of resources, like so many companies.
7 people. Limited time on.
Last question?
What's the company called?
Making friends.
Good, excellent question. There's your pen. So we do still have I think we have 4 copies of the book left. So if you haven't okay, so come up. And if you'd like more beer, we have more beer. So let's give a big round of applause. Let's also give a big round of applause for Darius, Dunlap, John, and all the volunteers. Can all the volunteers stand up and raise your hand? Because we usually have a ton here. Where are they? So thank you guys very much. We really appreciate it. So please drink my remaining beer, and even if it's PBR, and if it's not good enough, I will get you a Guinness.